Hello and good morning. We are at the final stage of the book of Victory of Light, and we will be studying today the end of the book and the wrap-up of the conclusion of this book. We started off by discussing the connection between Hanukkah and Sukkot, that the two festivals seem to be connected to one another because they are both of 8 days. Biblically, the festival of Sukkot is 8 days, and rabbinically, which is where the Hanukkah festival comes from, is also for 8 days. And also he asked a few questions of the differences between Hanukkah and the temple. The temple has 7 branches, and the temple menorah has, the Beit HaMikdash menorah has 7 branches, and the Hanukkah menorah has 8 branches. The Beit HaMikdash menorah was kindled where it was daytime, and over here, during Hanukkah, we kindle the menorah at the nighttime. And also, why would when there is a comparison to Sukkot through Beit Shammai, who feel that the menorah should be kindled 8, 7, 6, 5, so tonight, the 5th night, should really be 3 candles should be lit, 3 flames should be lit. And on the 6th night, 2, and on the 7th night, 1. I got that wrong. On the 5th night, 4 should be kindled. And on the 3rd night, and on the 6th night, 3, and on the 7th night, 2, and on the 8th night, 1. So he says the reason why he goes down is because he compares it to the bulls, which were offered during Sukkot in the temple. We don't follow that opinion, of course. We kindle it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, which is Beit Hillel. But why would Beit Shammai even think of connecting those two? And he went into a long discussion about what was the intention of the Greeks. They didn't destroy the temple; they defiled it. They didn't destroy the oil; they just broke the seals of the other oils. Their purpose was not to hurt the Jews physically. They weren't out to have a war and to eliminate the Jewish people, as you hear on all the other occasions. That's not the issue of Hanukkah. The issue of Hanukkah is that they wanted to remove the divinity, the godliness from the Torah, as we say in the prayer that we are reciting currently during this festival of Hanukkah. We say that they tried to make, when we say to God, we recap the story, we say they tried to make us forget, to make them, the Greeks tried to make them forget, those Jews, forget your Torah, your commandments, the commandments that are yours. In other words, not the commandments, but the commandments in which divinity is most emphasized. And those would be the commandments which are statutes, which is the word for commandments that is used in the prayer. Not only that, in any commandment, leave the godliness out of it. That was what they were pushing for. And therefore they targeted the oil. Oil represents the highest level there is. It floats to the top. It never really mixes into any of the liquids in which it's poured. It always rises to the top, a reference to the highest level. The highest level is a level where a person performs the commandments because they are commanded by God, by a supreme being who obviously knows better. And the reason why we do it is because we have an opportunity to forge a relationship with God. And when the other partner says, this is what I like, even if we don't understand why they may like it, we still go ahead and do it because the other person wants us to do it. And similarly, in the relationship with God, despite the fact that we know that every single commandment comes from God's desire, and the God's desire is in a place where we'll never understand the true meaning of all the mitzvahs. We don't understand the reason for even those that make sense to us. Nonetheless, in order for our relationship to be connected to God, we therefore make an effort to perform all of the commandments because they all embody God's will and God's desire. Now this is what these Greeks did. They went and sacrificed. They sacrificed themselves. They went to a war which they were not guaranteed that they had even a chance to win. But they could not handle the fact that there is a culture, there is a movement that is attempting to remove the soul of Judaism. Sure, you can eat latkes and you can dance and you can sing and kreplach and blintzes and all the good things that we have. But that's not what Judaism is. That's not the soul of Judaism. That's the body of Judaism. The soul of Judaism is the fact that God wants us to do it, and it's a relationship that we are forging. So every time we do a mitzvah, every time we put a mezuzah up on the door, and we focus on Shabbos, and we study Torah, and we put some money into the pushka. Every single time we are reestablishing a connection to God because God wants us to do that. Us physical low beings, if you will. Have the opportunity to have this relationship, this connection to God that no one has. No angel and no great soul. You need a body for this. So they went out and fought the ideology. It turned into a physical war, but it was really an ideological war. It was in order to save Judaism. Many, many Jews became Hellenized, they called it. It sounded very good for the Jews. It was all easy. It was so wonderful. Go to the stadium, cheer on the guys who are playing, and then go home and kindle your menorah in the window. Forget about God.
Weren't they also killed?
There were, sure, not a lot of them. Who do you mean by they?
Those Hellenistic Jews.
No, they weren't the target. The target were the Greeks, not the Jews. The Jews were reached out to and brought back. The Jews weren't fighting. If the Jews were fighting, then there would have had to have been a civil war. That wasn't a civil war. It was a war against the Greek culture. If the Jews were part of it, the Jews weren't the target here. It was to get the Greeks out of there. And once the Greeks are out of there, then philosophy, then you have your land back. Then you could focus. So they had to get a deeper, a most deep level within the people in order to go out to a war like that. It's not a simple thing. That's where we talked about Daniel Pearl. When push came to shove, they had to get into the deepest element of who that person really, really was, despite all the layers and covers and whatever it might have been.
Yeah, but that was one of the first things that dawned on me. I had to get the Greek out. That just, that's all I could think of. I have to get the Greek out. I have to get the Greek out. And I'm again going closer and closer to Torah. That was back in the 80s.
There ain't nothing wrong with the Greeks per se, and the yogurts are great.
Cheese too.
And I have some buddies living in Athens and Barcelona, the Chabad over there. When he lit the menorah, the first year he was there, right there in the central plaza of whatever in Athens, it was the most ironic, amazing experience. Because here you are in Greece, lighting a menorah for the very first time, a public menorah.
There's this, it's not really a children's video, but it's cartoon-like, called Lights, that illustrates this so well. Because basically the Jews, every time they did a mitzvah, these olive-based letters started floating around them. And what the Greeks were trying to do is just get figure out what those lights were and why the Jews keep, getting attracted to those lights. And that's what bothered them.
So the spirituality. So they had to get to the deepest part of a person, and this is why 8. Why 8? Because 8 represents a transcendent level, above, higher than the regular, even than the highest part of your regular, which is a Shabbos. It's higher than that. It's a bond and a connection that supersedes any type of human logic and intelligence. Similar to a bris, which also on the 8th day. A bris is also a bond and a connection beyond intelligence, beyond human capacity. That's why we do it on a baby who has no intelligence no ability. It's because the bond represents something that's deeper, that's greater than that. And that's why when the Mashiach comes, there will be the 8-stringed harp versus the 7-stringed harp that belonged to King David and in the temple. Because again, number 8 represents transcendent and greater. And that's why the Hanukkah menorah has 8 branches to it, not 7 like the temple. And that's also why Hanukkah is lit at nighttime, because the purpose is to reach out to everyone, even the rebels, even those that are night creatures, that only the night brings them out. They're called the Talmud, which is the same letters as rebels, because the whole purpose is to get into a deeper, higher, transcendent level, that even those who are as distant as rebels and darknesses can also come and be inspired by Hanukkah, by the light. Yes?
When the Mashiach comes, is the menorah that was in the Beis Hamikdash gonna come back?
Of course. Absolutely. That's the connection between Sukkot, because Sukkot, the whole concept of Sukkot is at surrounding level. The surrounding level represents a level that is deeper, that is higher, that is transcendent than the simple, normal, regular transmission of energy. Okay, so that's where we are until now, page 63 in the book. The idea of lighting the Hanukkah lamp from when the sun sets, in other words, when it starts getting dark, refers especially to the darkness of exile. Dark means, of course, when it starts getting dark outside, when the sun sets. These days, the sun sets at about 5:30. So we light the menorah right after the sun starts setting, and we have the night to do it. But in a deeper sense, it refers to the nighttime in which we currently find ourselves, the nighttime of exile. Especially the doubled and redoubled darkness of the times of the advent of the Mashiach. It's the advent, the time in which we find ourselves now is right before the Mashiach's time. According to our sages in the Talmud, in several places, they give certain signs, how to look out for, to know that this is the time of Mashiach. There is not a sign that they have given that is not happening today. So it's very, very much, this is the time of the Mashiach. It's already past that time. We've been in that period now for a few decades, where, for example, money is not worth anything. Until 50 years ago, a penny meant something, a nickel meant something, a dollar meant something. It doesn't happen anymore. For 2,000 years since that statement in the Talmud, nothing changed in that realm. Money always remained money. Today, money is nothing.
Yeah.
A dollar is normal. You had a dollar in 1935. You could have bought food for what? For half a week. You could have bought a loaf of bread and some milk and some, you could have bought some substance. What can you do with a dollar today?
Very little.
You can't even take a bus ride on a dollar. There's nothing almost and a penny.
The pennies are falling away. Canada's already started.
So the point is that that's sort of giving in. When they say let's get rid of pennies because pennies are not worth anything, make pennies worth something then.
Yeah.
But that's not. So the Talmud predicts this. The Talmud predicts a lot of chutzpah in this world, and boy, has that come.
Hey.
Come to fruition. The young ones will rise up against the older ones. Where's the respect that we used to have for our teachers and for our parents? Blah blah blah, and so on. There's all these are signs which never happened for 2,000 years, and they said when these things are happening, you should know that this is the footsteps of the Mashiach. So we know that we're in that time period. But what happens is, there's also, at the same time, many great developments. The modernization of the world led to incredible advances in science, in physics, in medicine, in technology, in connection between people. How many people are studying today which they couldn't study for the last 2,000 years. The Talmud, which is available in languages that everybody can understand, the words of Kabbalah and Hasidus. There's also an information flood of all kinds of wonderful things. And all of these are preparation for the Mashiach. The preparation for the Mashiach. Why are they negative things in preparation for the Mashiach? That's for a different time. But the positive things certainly are a preparation for a changed world, which is what has been predicted by the prophets some 3,000 years ago. So the world changes. That's the point. But it's dark. And the reason why it's so dark is because so much is available. Never has been that so much information, positive information, has been available. Never has there been a period in this world, ever, in the world, on the global scale, where one country sends soldiers to rebuild and to help countries that have undergone hurricanes and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and so on. You're taking soldiers who are supposed to be hurting other people, killing other people, and they're helping other people. So you have Israeli army field doctors who are delivering babies in the Philippines after they go through a typhoon. And you have the United States of America that has stationed its troops all over the world for political reasons, but in the meantime, they're helping out the people where they are. Then you have the losers of the world who are trying their best to hold back any kind of changes, like North Korea and many of the Arabic countries and so on. Africa, where corruption still reigns. But so the darkness is much greater when so much is available. It would make so much sense. When a country is invaded by a different country, the whole world banded together in 91 and drove Iraq out of Kuwait. Now you can say it's oil, and I don't know if I will disagree or agree. That's not the point. The point is that they said we are not going to tolerate aggression like that. And the world's trying to help out Syria and other countries that usually you just let them go. That's not the way it works anymore. So if there's so much good in this world, there's billions more people in this world than there ever was, and there's food for everyone and surplus of food, yet people are still going hungry. People are still dying from diseases because they're doing stupid things and because of politics, and people are still hurting one another. That's darkness of the greatest degree because there's so much light there. So the darkness is doubled. That's what he means, the darkness here. He say the dark ages were 300 years ago when there was no electricity. People were dying from diseases at the young age, women in childbirth, and there was not enough food for everybody, not enough money. Now we're in an enlightened time, but we're doing stupid things. So the darkness is doubled. This then is the lesson of the Hanukkah lamp for every single person during the time of exile. The purpose of the darkness of exile is to awaken the service of self-sacrifice, which is what Hanukkah stands for, through which the darkness is refined and transformed to light. And through the collective service of every single member of the children of Israel together, or at least a majority of them, since a majority of an entity is considered like its entirety, and even through one mitzvah of one Jew, whether in deed, speech, or thought, he tips the scale. This is the quote from the Rambam, who takes it out of the Talmud. He tips the scale to the side of favor for himself and the entire world, and causes for himself and for them deliverance and salvation. So the purpose of having darkness is to inspire people to find the deeper elements within him or her and do a mitzvah to combat the darkness and to bring light. And you never know that one action is what the world has been waiting for, and that can tip the scales and make it all happen. So each individual, just like the menorah, just like Hanukkah, each individual could have the ability to wipe away the darkness for good. Page 64. Now, if any mitzvah can bring deliverance to the world, certainly an increase in the fulfillment of the mitzvah of a Hanukkah lamp would bring deliverance. But deliverance can happen with any mitzvah we just said now from the Rambam. Good morning, Maritz. Welcome back. What? What's her new name? I said Maritz.
No, you did say Maritza. I'm sure.
Did?
Yeah, he did say Maritza. He didn't emphasize
Sitting on
it.
the Ritz.
Yep, Maritza. Is it Chepi?
We're on tape now.
Oh
We're
dear.
live. Anyway, so the law says any mitzvah can tip the scales. How much more so then the mitzvah of the Hanukkah lamp? For this mitzvah is especially related to the deliverance and the salvation, of the redemption that will occur through the Mashiach, since Mashiach, as well as Elijah, who is the herald of the redemption, are of 8 princes, which is identical to the concepts of 8 lights of Hanukkah. What does that mean? So let's look at 132, at footnote 132. This is Micha. Micha was a prophet who has a very short book. There are 12, there are long books, the big books of Joshua and Solomon and Samuel and Kings. And then there is there is a group of short books, 12 short books. One of them is the book of Jonah, which is 4 chapters about Jonah being told to go and speak to the people who lived in a big city called Nineveh. And he was thrown into the sea, and a fish swallowed him up, and he was there for 3 days, and then they spat him out, and so on. That's the most fascinating of all of them, because that's a story from beginning to end. The rest of them are not stories, but most of them deal with very heavy, harsh admonishment, and they're not that long. They carry, though, some heavy punches, except for 2 or 3 of them, which are less severe. Micha has many prophecies about the future, about Mashiach, as does Malachi, as does Haggai, and as does Ovadia, which is only 1 chapter, that whole book. So Micha, which comes right after the book of Jonah, gives a lot of that prophecy of the Mashiach. And so he was a prophet, and then the Talmud in the Sukkah takes this Sukkah is of course 8 days, so it takes this verse and it explains it. What happens there? The verse in Micha, in discussing the future leadership in the days of Mashiach, reads, "If Assyria comes to our land and treads upon our palaces, then we will set up 7 shepherds and 8 officers against him." Oh, that might not sound like too much of a opposition to Assyria. What? You're going to send 7 shepherds to them? And you're going to send 8 princes, 8 officers? What about the army? So the Talmud says, Mashiach, with the aid of these 7 shepherds and 8 princes, will destroy Assyria and prevent it from invading Israel again. Now, the Talmud in Sukkah asks, who are the 7 shepherds? It answers, David at the center, Adam, Seth, and Methuselah at his right, and Abraham, Jacob, and Moses at his left. So those are the 7 shepherds. In other words, the righteous ones of all the generations that preceded the flood, and then, of course, the patriarchs and Moses. The Talmud continues, who are the 8 princes? The 8 princes are Jesse, Yishai, the father of David, Saul, the first king, Samuel, Amos is the prophet that comes before Jonah, Zephaniah, another one of those small prophets who does a lot of discussing about the Mashiach as well, Tzidkiah, who was a righteous king, Elijah, and Mashiach. Okay? Now, those are the princes and the shepherds. So what's God going to do? He's going to send the 7 shepherds and the 8 princes to make sure that Assyria never attacks the Jews again and it destroys them. Okay, now the question obviously is, so why are some called shepherds and others are called princes, officers? So let's see the next footnote here, 133. Like physical shepherds who physically feed and nourish their sheep, there are 7 spiritual shepherds who feed, quote, different spiritual elements to Israel. They feed whatever it is to Israel. What do they feed? Abraham, for example, nurtures love of God because he stood for complete love, kindness to anyone, to any stranger, to any time. Whatever is happening, you get out and you show love. Jacob nurtures mercy because he was the most true of all of them, because he had to deal with every single element of difficulty and he had to overcome them. For that, you need a combination of kindness and love and of discipline to be disciplined and focused the way it is. And Moses nurtures faith. That should be obvious because he is the one who took the Jews out of Egypt. They're following him into the desert and into Israel. He made the biggest move that Israel ever made, that the Jewish people ever made, which is to come out as a nation from another nation and become its own nation. To draw forth these attributes to Israel, it is necessary that they be nurtured by our great shepherds. These are continued to be called the shepherds. We learn from them all the time and we remember them in all areas. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are mentioned every single time we pray, without fail. We constantly mention them in the Amidah, which is the most important prayer, and elsewhere. And Moses is mentioned all the time. Whenever we study the Torah, we talk about Moses and we think about Moses. The shepherds infuse these attributes into Israel so that Israel may internalize them. For such is the function of a Jewish leader, that the Jewish leader is not just there to provide, but the Jewish leader is there to create further leaders. A great leader has great followers. The greatest leaders create the greatest leaders after him. That's a leader. A leader makes everyone else into a leader as well. So hence there are 7 of these shepherds. For as mentioned above, 7 represents hishtalshalut, or the natural order within which these attributes are positioned. The natural order in the way things work. So as we mentioned before, the regular or normal way of things happening is that there are 7 days of the week, and on the 7th day is the greatest of the highest achievement of the natural order. Natural order. Moreover, the shepherds feed and nourish. They provide internal spiritual sustenance. That's why we always call upon Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to intercede on our behalf. We travel to their resting places, which unfortunately I won't be doing when I go to Israel tomorrow. I will not be visiting the graves of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because they don't have the guts to go to the city of Hebron, which is our city, purchased by Abraham, the place over there, but we're taking young students and they don't go to places that are controversial.
Dangerous.
I spent a few hours in Hebron just a year and a half ago, last time I was in Israel. We went in and we went out.
Yeah, about there.
There's Chabad living in the Hebron, in the old city, and everywhere. So, anyway, but we won't be going there. But if that place was not, if the cowards who lived in Israel didn't try and give in and hold on to cities that belong to us and let other people live in other places, which they do already, then we would be going to Hebron. Obviously, it definitely would be a focal point of anyone traveling to there. Because how do you miss Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? You don't miss that. Or the grave of King David, which is not there, which is in Jerusalem. Or the grave of Joseph, which I've never been to, because it's in Nablus, it's in Shechem, which is another place that was purchased by Jacob. Anyway, not to get into that issue, that element, but these are places that we never stop thinking about. We never stop going to. We never stop focusing on, because that's where our, not just our history, that's where our fundamental connection begins, and where it continues. We continue to coin the phrase that these are patriarchs, fathers and mothers of the nation, and the founding fathers of America are still very relevant to us. We might not be able to know who they are, but what they established here is very, very important. And the Constitution that they wrote is hopefully what makes this country continue to be the greatest country. Fathers, patriarchs are very, very relevant and important to who the Jewish people are. And we learn from them all kinds of messages and all kinds of lessons, because they continue to be the shepherds. By contrast, the 8 princes.
Can I ask one question? In Malachi, he says that he'll return the heart of the children to the fathers and the heart of the fathers to the children. And I can understand that we have like one heart as a people. But why does he have to return the heart of the fathers to us? Why is their heart away from us?
So the commentary over there, it's the end of the book of Malachi, the end of chapter 3. The commentary says that when it says, "I will return the hearts of the fathers on the children," it means through the children. Through, that the children will bring the father's hearts back. And that means, in practical terms, that there are many, many instances where children turn away from what their parents taught them in the positive sense. The parents were neglectful, and the children come along and they say, how were you so neglectful? The children are bringing their fathers back. In this generation, in this time, specifically after the Holocaust, that's one of the positives of the children rising up against their parents in a positive way. Not against their parents, but to bring their parents' heart back as well to Judaism. And it's very, very relevant. You find that in many, many places where children all of a sudden have gone out and have experienced what the parents experienced themselves when they were children, and they left it, neglected it, or whatever. And now the children are bringing them back, which it couldn't be fathomable 100 years ago. Children weren't going to tell their parents what to do.
So it's not talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
In a deeper sense, perhaps, as well, because they left the final business to bring the Mashiach specifically not in the hands of the great ones. We are like dwarves on the shoulders of giants, but we are the ones who will make it happen. We stand on their laurels, we stand on their shoulders, but we are the ones who do it. And we're the children that bring back. But really, it refers to, it's Elijah. So Elijah, it says, I'll send Elijah and he will do this. But that precedes the coming of the Mashiach. So that prepares the world that the children are able to impact, influence, inspire their parents to also return back to Judaism. But it means through, not on. Okay, so by contrast, the 8 princes were not leaders of Israel, but independent, righteous individuals. You can ask, what about Saul? He was a king, but he didn't last for very long. He was a king for very short, and nothing was enduring there. It was a dynasty of David that was enduring, not him. And even Samuel didn't have a continuation. Some of these people were leaders, but they weren't leaders that are in perpetuity. Okay, so by contrast, the 8 princes were not leaders of Israel, but independent, righteous individuals. In spiritual terms, they provide the energy for Israel to serve God in a manner that transcends Hishtalshalut, or in a manner of makifim. Not, in other words, above, transcendent of the norm. Much like a prince, who, unlike the king, is removed from the populace. There are therefore 8 of them, as the number 8 represents that which is beyond Hishtalshalut, or transcendent Hishtalshalut, transcendent the normal manner of transmission. So, back to the verse. When Assyria strikes, it will primarily be the 8 princes who will drive him off, for they possess that transcendent power with which to fight evil and spiritual impurity.
Who's Assyria?
Assyria today?
Yeah.
is all the negative forces that today Assyria would be where Iraq, Iran, Turkey, where all the trouble is happening right now, exactly where it's predicted to be happening, where the greatest threat to Israel is Iran, and Iraq was that was eliminated by Israel in 1980, that when they bombed that nuclear reactor, and then later on by Bush 1 and Bush 2. You love him or hate him, or agree or disagree, but you know what? That's not a threat to Israel anymore. Whether it's a threat to America or not, I don't know, but let's not get into the politics of it. The bottom line is that ain't no more threat. That has been eliminated. By who? That's the most transcendent thing you can think of. The other countries came into the whole world, stood up to Iraq. Remember when the Iraq War, first one, the Gulf War, 1991, they were retaliating against Israel. Israel had nothing to do with this war, but they were firing Scud missiles into Israel, and the rest of the world stood up for Israel, basically, which is, I think, unbelievable. If you think about that miracle of the Gulf War, and that no one was really directly killed by the Scud missiles, that's miraculous, transcendent.
And 39.
39 of them, right? And one went into an American bunker and killed dozens of people.
180, I think.
Dozens of Americans.
Yeah, American soldiers. The last day of the war. So that's transcendent, and that's what's going on. And there's a couple of spots of darkness still that needs to be that these 8 princes. That's where Assyria is. The 8 princes. The Rebbe spoke about this in 1977. This is from 77. He's telling you what's about to happen. The 8 princes are thus related to the concept of the 8 Hanukkah lamps. For the Greeks contaminated all the oils, or the Chokhmah, the highest level, in the sanctuary, conspiring to cause Israel to forget your Torah. Therefore, to win this war, it was necessary to elicit a transcendent divine light, the supernal makifim, the surrounding level, the transcendent level, a dimension embodied by the 8 princes. That's the idea, the spiritual idea, that the 8 comes to play in a time where you really need to destroy the forces of evil, which is again the message of Hanukkah, getting rid of darkness by shining 8 lamps, which I will do in the Holy Land, where it happens. Number 8 will be there. There is another aspect of the special connection between the Hanukkah lamps and the future redemption. Just as the Hanukkah lamps never cease, that the Talmud says that even in the time of the Messianic, when Mashiach has come already, and we are all in that time, not in the time that's immediately before it, where we are now, but actually after it, past it. It says that the commandments will be eliminated, will be gone. Now the question is, wait a minute, the Torah is eternal. It's eternal for all times. If God wants it today, why wouldn't He want it then? The answer is, of course He wants it then, but they will be trivial. The commandments that we perform today, let's think about the big ones. Let's say Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and sitting in a sukkah and putting on tefillah and keeping kosher. These big ones will not be the big ones then. They'll be normal, natural. Those won't be the issue. There'll be much greater emphasis on much higher levels, because everyone will be raised to such a high level. There will not be any more challenges of darkness and difficulty and evil. There will be no more evil. The prophet says that God removes all of that. All the spirit of impurity will be removed from the world, as Zacharias says. So that there won't be no more challenges. So the world will be elevated to a much higher level. So performing mitzvahs on parchment and of tefillin and sefer Torah and that will be mitzvahs, but that won't be the highest element. The highest element will be going to the temple and getting closer to God. Those will be much more. So the rest of the mitzvahs will be lesser emphasize. They'll be there. Not that they'll be destroyed, but the way we have them today won't be the same as we'll have them then. Besides the two mitzvahs of Hanukkah and Purim. We can't get rid of Purim. We will get rid of all these sad days in the calendar, of course. There'll be no more fast days, and none of that. But, and even on Yom Kippur, there may be celebration rather than, because atonement won't be necessary. But Hanukkah and Purim will remain prominent and important days. They will be the highlights of the year, because both of them are exile holidays. Hanukkah, although the Jews were in Israel, but there was an exile. And Purim, the Jews weren't even in Israel. So something about what we did outside in the darkness has a much more precious connection to us than other things. When we go through difficulties, when we go through challenges, and we come out from them and we accomplish something, those accomplishments are much more precious to us because we really had to work for them. We really had to earn them. If you think about something in your life that you accomplished, that you purchased, or that you received only after very, very harsh, heavy, difficult effort, blood, sweat, and tears, that becomes much more precious. When the sages talk about the mitzvah of tzedakah, they say it's the greatest mitzvah to do. Why is it the greatest mitzvah? Because it's really the only mitzvah that you can do because you've invested every single facet of your life into it. You earn money by working, and when you work, you have to have your intellectual faculties and your emotional faculties, and everything has to be focused. And that's the money represents your essence. By giving away something that represents your life, that's the most precious thing, because it's hard to earn money. Money is not easy to come by, if I need to remind anyone about that.
Yeah.
So it's the difficulty makes the earned outcome much more precious. So Hanukkah and Purim came amid tremendous difficulty, tremendous challenge. Even more than Passover. And by Passover, we already received the reward. We were at Sinai, and became a nation. This is way after that. So Hanukkah will not be eliminated even during the days of Mashiach. It will be a prominent holiday. So likewise, the Hanukkah lamps never cease. Let's read the paragraph again. There is another aspect of the special connection between the Hanukkah lamps and the future redemption. Just as the Hanukkah lamps never cease, likewise, the future redemption will be an eternal redemption, after which exile is not possible. Similarly, the third Beit HaMikdash, the third temple, is an eternal temple, which will never cease. And all of this will be with the coming of our righteous Mashiach. May he come and redeem us and lead us proudly to our land. May it be very soon. Amen. So that's the end of the book. And I just wanted to wrap things up and place it all in perspective. The Greeks, during the time of Hanukkah, actually did something that is no other holiday like this. That the Jewish people were actually in Israel, and not like the Sukkah for the desert, the God's protection. They're not like the Exodus, not like Sinai, not like Rosh Hashanah. The Jewish people, Purim, the Jewish people were in Israel, in the Holy Land. And the Greeks came and basically invaded. They came to rape, if you will, the Jewish people. It was a takeover. And it either was a seduction. It looked very good to so many Jews. Oh, let's just eliminate. Why keep kosher? We can. They have a good point, these Greeks. Or it was by force, or it was a rape. Either way, it was an invasion. They came into our property. They came into our land. See, when something happens on someone else, we're in exile. We're in Poland. we're in Greece, we're in Rome, we're in Egypt. So when you're in a country, when you're in a land, inside of another person's land, although we can't accept it, we can understand where it's coming from. Hey, you're in their country, you've chosen to remain separated, you've chosen to remain conspicuous, you've chosen to remain different, as Haman says, than everyone else. So you're prone to cause attention that might not be positive attention. Of course, you can never accept that some other people should be violent towards other people just because they happen to worship differently. That's just pure hatred and ignorance, boorish, losing, foolish stupidity of wickedness. But you can't accept it. But you can at least understand. You can at least accept. Yeah. Hey, listen, we're in a foreign land. The whole thing of Israel today comes to represent the opposite of that. Today we have a land. The Holocaust can't happen because Israel won't allow it to happen. Never again. Why would never again? Because we have our own land. Whatever that means, and I'm not getting into that. It's unfortunate that the people who run that land are trying very hard, desperately, to ruin every one of those elements. Anyway, but that's not for now. The bottom line is that's what it stands for. So when someone invades Israel today, that's raping. Hey, wait a minute. We feel so emotionally disturbed about these Arabic claims to the Temple Mount and all of that because what are you talking about? It's ours. I understand. If you're screaming that Poland, we're in a foreign country, I understand. When Helen Thomas says, "Get the hell out of Palestine, go back to Germany, go back to Poland," what are you talking about? It doesn't make any. That is the most vile, disturbing statement anyone can make. So the Greeks came into our land. And not just they came in, they wanted to convert, to transform Judaism into Greek Hellenistic culture. And they did it with being sweet. They demonstrated, they built the stadiums, they brought their women, they brought their food, and they said, look how great life is. And as Jews always do, we're always looking to run to something else. There's something else we believe in. We seem to run into everyone else's backyard. Jews run to India. I'm talking about Israelis that are looking for some spirituality. And they're running to, that's why Chabad is all over India, Chabad's all over the Far East, in Thailand and in Nepal. They run into gurus, into ashrams, to experience spirituality.
When they have it themselves.
It's in your own backyard.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you need to stay in Israel. You can find spirituality, but why run to other religions and cultures and try and become them? I'm not criticizing the culture or the religion. I'm just saying, why would a Jew who has all of that seek other cultures? So in Greece, it's not.
Mama said to an Israeli himself.
Dalai Lama is a very spiritual kind of guy, but I'm talking about gurus who live in a mountain in India.
Right. No, I'm talking about this Israeli guy who decided to be Dalai Lama's disciple and study and grew in his thing, and then had an appointment to see him. And when he saw him, he asked him, "What are you doing here? Why are you looking? What are you looking here that you don't have yourself? You are the original. Go back to your country."
Well, I'm glad he said that.
Study your Torah." And he actually made this guy shit up. He says, I had another girl. I had a girl who came to me, the same story as you. Go back and look for her and marry her.
So we tend as Jews to be very, very heavily involved in the culture in which we find ourselves, even if it's at the expense of our own personal culture, Judaism and religion. I've always wondered why why it's so important to Jews to celebrate Thanksgiving with all of its customs and everything else. This is not to bash Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the most beautiful, amazing holiday. But you know what? We have holidays that Jewish people don't even know of. Biblical holidays. They don't even know of. Who knows what Shmini Atzeres is, the 8th day? And who knows what the 7th day of Passover is? It's just totally irrelevant. Shavuos. If we wouldn't make a big deal out of the Ten Commandments and serve blintzes and pasta and ice cream, we had 50-something people here that day. It was unbelievable. For the first time ever. The Ten Commandments. The whole world talks about the Ten Commandments. Where are we? It's not a relevant holiday because it makes us feel whatever, guilty or. So I believe, I think, I mean, maybe I could be completely wrong, but it's just this is me talking now, that the Jews love Thanksgiving because you can be American. And right after Thanksgiving, you can't be December 25th. That most Jews, I won't say all, but most Jews sort of have a red line. After Thanksgiving, let's go to Israel. let's think about Hanukkah. We have a problem because it's another religious holiday. Although many Jews take advantage of this time as well, as the famous silly story is about the teacher, the Catholic teacher, went through the whole class. What do you do for Christmas? What do you do? Then there's a little Jewish boy, Jaime Cohen, sitting in the corner. He said, what do you do? He says, well, Dad gets home on Christmas Eve. He takes us all to the store. We look at the bare shelves, and he say, "Thank you, Jesus." So we've learned to take advantage. After all, Jesus was Jewish. And,
That's right.
However, it's a problem. We feel uncomfortable. Jews are very, very into celebrating Thanksgiving and then New Year's. They're very into it because it helps us get past the being non-American, and somehow we feel uncomfortable standing out as Jews, which is why the public menorah tonight is so important. Not to flaunt in-your-face Judaism, but to find the one thing in the year that is a universal message, that we can be a light unto the nations as well, that everyone can come to that type of celebration. Everyone can learn the lesson of light, in turning darkness into light. Everyone can learn the message of celebrating the freedom. So the Jews, though, tend to not focus on this stuff. We don't wish to make a big deal out of ourselves for whatever reason it is. I'm not getting into that either. But the bottom line is we've tried very hard to melt in to the culture and not stand out. I was sitting on a plane going from New York to Atlanta maybe 10 years ago next to a couple from Florida. And the husband says to me, "I have a question to ask you. And please don't take the details of the question because I'm not talking about the details. I'm talking about just the general thing. The question was, doesn't the Bible say that being gay, you're not allowed to practice gay?" I said, "Yes, it does." So how come, this is what they ask, how come Jews say, that the Jewish people say that it's not a problem? So I said, look, let's not get into the details of this issue, because the details are much more than what the eye sees. But the bottom line is, Jews who observe the Torah don't say that. It's Jews who don't observe, who are trying to find ways to take down whatever it is, to be politically correct, and to melt in to society. But that's a lie. The Torah doesn't say that. And that's the problem here. The problem is that the non-Jews need to hear from us that we are Jews and we're very proud and we're very happy where we are. We don't need to follow the other cultures and religions. I'm not saying don't therefore live in the dark ages, live in the ghetto. That's not the point. The point is be a light. Tear down that wall and be Jewish. That's the point. We hide behind our Judaism and we want to be more American, which is what the Jews in the time of the Greeks did. You have whatever you need. You have your culture, you have your philosophy, you have your spirituality, you have everything. You have divinity, you have God. So what do we want? We're looking for a Greek way of doing things. We didn't have stadiums. And we didn't have, what's the difference between a pig and a cow? These are the things that Greece, and so they came and raped us and invaded us. When somebody comes into our house, if somebody were to come at 2 o'clock in the morning to your house and take $10, that's it, not take anything else. And that morning we would feel, and we knew that somebody had come, we would look at the video, the security, we would know, we would feel completely invaded. We'd be incensed, outraged. Because no one has a right to walk into your property unless you let them in. And so Hanukkah represents people, cultures that tried to invade our own land, our own, where we were in control. The only one. And therefore, the only way to fight this, the only way to get rid of this is to be a light. Being a light means to follow what God wants us to do, and find that deeper element like the Maccabees did. The Maccabees are not sports teams. The Maccabees were people who stood up for divinity, who stood up for godliness of the Jewish religion, and made sure that this religion will continue to be the light onto the world. And our mission as Jewish people is not to fall into the culture that's around us, but to create the culture around us, to be a light unto the nations that everyone else should be able to learn from what they know we have to offer. And we have plenty to offer. And all we need to do is just focus on it, be that way, behave that way. And then we become a light unto all the nations, and we celebrate the celebration of light. And ultimately, we prepare ourselves for the ultimate light, the light of the Messianic era. May it be speedily in our days. Happy Hanukkah.